Have you ever seen something so amazingly painted that you wondered to yourself, man, I wish I could paint half as good as that? Then you're in the right place. Let me show you how I easily paint mediocre looking models. And maybe one day I'll allow myself to believe these are not that bad. Okay. Self-deprecating humor aside, I do believe this project turned out pretty well. So let's jump right in and take a look at painting some slaves to darkness. This first model is one of the Chaos Warriors, and I painted it, I guess what I would call more traditionally. I started with a black primer and then laid on base colors until it was completely covered. First, I started with a white that I thought would look good for the skin, kind of like an undead, chaosy look. Eventually there will be a wash that darkens it up a bit, but I thought this was a good start. Next, I decided to go with a metallic gold for around the edges of the shield and some of the little knickknacks on the shield, I guess. I've never tried that non-metallic metal painting technique, although it could be kind of cool. It's always seemed like a lot of work, and I don't know if I want to do it. So instead I like using these metallic paints, like this nickel-y, silvery looking one that I put on a lot of stuff, mostly the armor and the rest of the shield. Gotta try and find all those little tiny bits of metal that are sticking out. Next, we've got some light skin color that we're going to put on this skin on this pauldron up here. Again, these were just base colors. My thought was that I would put washes and stuff on them later to darken them a bit. Here's some light brown for like the leathery looking areas, the straps, belt, so on and so forth. Although I guess right here I just used it for those straps on the shield. Next I used red for the clothy bits hanging from his waist. There's a lot of little trinkets and tidbits on there, so I had to be kinda careful. And then I was going to paint over those later. Actually, right now I'm going to paint them gold. So, I'm going to just do that metallic gold on all the little circle-y, medallion-y things. There's a couple on the back that I'll do at a different time. Next, we're using a dark brown on like the leg and the boots. I thought this was kind of like a dark leathery looking type of color. So, it's kind of hard to see against just the black, but it's there. There's that dark brown. Oop, I missed some spots. So here's some dark brown on that arm. So here's those places I put the dark brown. Just one last go before I move on to something else. Now I'm going back over with that light brown again on some of these little straps that are on the boots. Just kind of changing up the color, I guess. Then we've got that Speedo looking thing that he's got on. Okay, it's not really a Speedo, but his little pant things. Also went through and did the little wrist straps that are holding on the piece of armor. And then, yeah, so down there, the straps up there as well. Then we're going back to some white for the trophy skulls he's got scattered around his body. Then the spikes that are coming out of his leg. I figured they were kind of an extension of his skin or body as well, so I painted them white. There's this little random vial I decided to paint red. I don't know, that's about it. Here's me going back on those gold coins along the belt line. So there's a bunch of them got to get through. So I believe that puts all of the base colors on there for the most part. So we're going to go into the washes now. I figured this black would go well on all the metal and then on the skulls, kind of just to darken everything up. So I don't mind it. I think it looks good for the most part, but it might be a little bit too dark in some spots. So we'll have to put some highlights, but that might have happened anyway, so. Then I decided to go with this flesh wash for, well, you guessed it, the flesh. So kind of give it this brownish tint. It almost needed something darker though, because now it just kind of looks muddy, to be honest. But we're going to press forward anyway and put some more on this bit of skin up here. Next, I bought these effects paints that I thought would be kind of cool. So I basically just used this dry blood one on a couple things, like that and then some of the weapons. It's kind of cool, but probably really only good if you want gory stuff. At least that one. Here I've decided to go back in for some white highlights on the skin. Mostly because, like I said, I just thought it looked kind of muddy, so I figured add some little white streaks here and there might make them pop. And I think in the grand scheme of things, it was a good thing. Then I did kind of this little dry brush with nickel over those spots that I thought looked kind of dark from before. It's not quite perfect, but I do think it helped a bit. Then the last thing I did in this traditional paint method was just to highlight this skin on that shoulder up there. And that I actually do think helped a lot. So here's the final piece of the traditionally painted one. Not too shabby, but it has some issues. All of the other minis besides the warriors, I did the slap chop method with speed paints. So basically I started with them all black primed and then put a light gray dry brush over them to give them kind of, I don't know, kind of like a stone look. I'm not perfect at this yet, so I've only done it like 1 or 2 other times. But so after the dry brush gray, I use a dry brush white, but only on the top parts, kind of like where the light would hit. At least that's my idea of it. I don't know if it's exactly correct, but it's kind of working for me, so. My understanding is this then brings out the highlights and the shadows with the speed paints. So I decided to go with this skin color for, well, his skin. I thought that it might be too human, but once the furs come in later, it's not too bad. You can tell even now, though, the lights and darks that are starting to pop through with that slap chop stuff. I decided to go with the black for his fur. I just thought it would look good with the light skin. As you can see, my planning of the light skin and dark fur have led to a proper contrast between the skin and the fur. Nyah.
What?
Anyway, so then I went with a red for the fabric, kind of like I did with the warriors. It ended up being pretty dark. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but none of the highlights really come through. Next, I went with this gray for the metal. Well, some of the metal, I guess. I didn't want all of the metal armor to look the same, so I just kind of did some of the pieces. So like there was that chunk right there in the back, and then these plates in the front, and then the helmet, well, part of the helmet. I grabbed this blue-gray for the rest. It's still very much that grayish color, but with a blue tint to it. That, and it's not quite as dark as the other gray. So now we've got kind of like these 2 different types of metals on there. There's that dark steel gray looking, and then this kind of like blue-gray. Next, I went with this dark wood for, well, the wood. So the handle of the axe and then also the hooves. I thought those needed to be brown. So this big guy had a bunch of horns and bones, so I thought that pallid bone made a lot of sense to put on those. And so I did. It's surprisingly kind of a nice color. I don't know how to explain it. It's just cool. Next, I thought this hardened leather would look good on his belt. And it does. Okay, well, it wasn't just his belt. It was his belt and some wrist straps. Some little things here and there. Bibbity bops, you know. Now, this next color, I'm not sure if it works or not. But I wanted something different besides that leather color for these little straps that are holding on the metal. And so I went with this yellow. And they're kind of all over. So here, there, back here a lot. So I did end up going back over these chains on his back, but besides that, that's pretty much it. He was done for the most part. I did decide to go back in with some whites to do some like super highlights, like really, really light, shiny. And I think they kind of work. I just kind of did it willy-nilly, but I'm sure there's a rhyme or reason to it for a professional painter. But overall, I think it looked pretty good. It turned out well. The white adds just that little bit of pop. So job well done, Speed Paints. Last but not least, I went back to traditional painting for the bases. I just did kind of these like dry, square looking blobs to start out with. My idea was like this cracked dirt ground, kind of like a deserty look. I wanted to give the illusion of like these little, well, cracks. So that's why it's got these kind of blobs and then the darker lines separating them. Although they ended up not being dark enough, so I pulled out the black and kind of went over them a little bit better so you could actually see them. When it dries, it's not that black, but it is more noticeable, so I thought that helped. And last, I went with this lighter brown, and I kind of went where I thought there wouldn't be shadow, so that's why I'm kind of going at it from above. Just kind of looking down and seeing where everything would kind of hit. And it would be kind of if the sun was straight above it, which isn't exactly accurate, but I don't know, it worked for this. Then I kind of put these lines on the edges along where I thought the light might hit under the dark side, but mostly just to give it some interesting highlights. And then I finished with some little black cracks to kind of give it some texture. It was actually a pretty simple base, just took a bit of time and a lot of randomness in how I put the lights and shadows. So, cool. So in the end, I think they all turned out pretty well. Everything fits together, which is great. And the painting actually didn't take that long. It was just me trying to get the videos put together that took forever. But it was a fun project, so I'm not going to complain about any of it. And if you made it this far, I want to thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate you hanging in there. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.